Howdy ESSM 406. Welcome to the lecture Command and Control. We are going to talk about how command and control environmental policies are a part of the greater framework of environmental policy. Now, a few of the very important ones that you've heard about are the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Endangered Species Act. So command and control is basically when the government tells you what to do. So an example is for coal-fired electricity plants are required to have scrubbers that remove sulfur dioxide from their smokestacks. And everyone must do this. If you are in the business of coal-fired electricity, you have to have those scrubbers. And there's tons of regulations like this. It's not just environmental policy that have command and control. There's plenty within the health policy. Safety regulations are like this. Paying your taxes. Everyone must pay like a sales tax and income tax, depending on where you live. Those are required. And so that's sort of basically how government works, are these command and control regulations. Now, the most important environmental policy is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Now, this was signed into law by President Richard Nixon in 1969. And he actually did most of the landmark environmental laws. So from 1968 to 1974, that's when the majority of these environmental laws were created. NEPA, so the National Environmental Policy Act, it says that the federal government must disclose to the American public any environmental effects of any action it takes. Now, this is not saying that it cannot cause damage to the environment. In that sense, it's a very weak law. It just says that the government must disclose any effects. And it does this through the environmental impact statement. Now, you've probably heard about them in the past. And if you work in forestry, you might be interested to know that the U.S. Forest Service actually writes more environmental impact statements than any other agency. But when you hear of a new highway going in, or new houses, or commercial buildings being built, they're all required to write an environmental impact statement. And if you do something on wetlands, you actually have two that are involved. So if you're giving a permit to someone that wants to fill in a wetland to do construction, they also have to deal with the Clean Water Act to see the impacts of that construction on the water of that region. So this is a very important law. NEPA interacts with another law called the Administrative Procedures Act. Now, the Administrative Procedures Act is not an environmental law. It's a law from the 1940s, and it says the government shouldn't do anything that is arbitrary or capricious. And the courts have to decide what arbitrary and capricious mean in relation to these laws. But that's really good, right? We want to protect ourselves from a government that's capricious and arbitrary. So when the government writes an EIS, they have to disclose to the American people if there will be any environmental effects. It doesn't do anything about not harming, just disclosing. Another important benefit is you, as a citizen, can sue the national government and say they have not properly disclosed the environmental impacts of the actions they're going to take. And this lack of disclosure could be arbitrary and capricious. So that gives NEPA a lot of power for American citizens to use to make sure that their environment and the environmental policies are protecting the public. It's a very important decision-making tool for national government, and actually some state governments have enacted similar things. So California actually has the California Environmental Quality Act, which is very similar, almost identical to NEPA. Texas actually just doesn't have any law like this. Let's go back to federal and talk about another law related to this. So one of the topics a lot of you are writing about is the Endangered Species Act. Now, this is a predominantly command and control law. You cannot kill, take, damage an endangered species. So if the government, the federal government, is going to do something that would hurt an endangered species, they have to write an environmental impact statement. So NEPA and the Endangered Species Act are actually nested together. And there are some aspects of the Endangered Species Act that are not command and control. So we've introduced like wildlife habitat conservation plans, there's landowner incentive programs, various other programs that are under the Endangered Species Act that are not command and control. But mostly the Endangered Species Act is a command and control system where the government says you cannot harm the endangered species. Similarly, if we look at the Clean Water and the Clean Air Act, those two are very strong command and control acts and regulation. They regulate a lot of pollution. So for instance, you cannot discharge direct sewage into a river in the United States. We're lucky. There's lots of countries in the world where you can put raw sewage right into the river. But here in the US, the American public is protected from that. Another example is the Clean Water or Clean Air Act, like we were talking about at the beginning, protecting us from the pollutants that are put into the air. So these are classic command and control regulations. In our next lecture, we're actually going to talk about what are the problems that are associated with enacting a command and control environmental regulation.